Welcome to the deep dive. You know we take all those sources you send us and we boil them down to the most interesting insights.
The most fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating insights. And today,
Most fascinating insights.
today we're tackling the Roswell incident.
Yeah.
That whole, alien crash, government cover-up story that's been circulating for decades.
Right.
But we're not going down that typical extraterrestrial route today. Instead, we're taking a deep dive into the Roswell Deception by James Carrion.
That's right. Carrion presents an entirely different perspective, suggesting the Roswell incident wasn't about aliens, but a meticulously crafted deception operation by the U.S. military during the height of the Cold War.
I've got to admit, this has got my conspiracy theory-loving brain firing on all cylinders, so where do we even begin to unpack this?
Well, to truly grasp the weight of this theory, we need to travel back to 1947, right at the dawn of the Cold War. Imagine the U.S. fresh off World War II, now facing this new looming threat. From the Soviet Union?
Yeah, I can only imagine the tension. They had just witnessed the destructive power of the atomic bomb. Were they afraid the Soviets were developing something even more terrifying?
Absolutely. The fear of a surprise attack, especially one launched over the Arctic, was very real. And to make matters worse, the recent Canadian spy trials had exposed a vast network of Soviet operatives working right under their noses. Here in North America,
Wow.
the U.S. was on edge, to say the least.
So they're on high alert, deeply suspicious of Soviet capabilities. That's where this theory gets really intriguing, right? Carrion suggests that the Roswell incident wasn't a genuine UFO crash, but a strategic deception, almost like a form of psychological warfare.
Exactly. It was all about manipulating information to mislead their enemy. Now, pulling off a deception of this magnitude requires a highly specialized team. And that's where the Joint Security Control, or JSC, comes into play. This was a top-secret U.S. military unit responsible for planning and executing elaborate deception operations.
So we're not talking about a few guys in a basement with a mimeograph machine. This is a serious, organized effort.
Absolutely. And Carrion believes two key figures were at the heart of this operation: Colonel Willard Van Diemen Brown and Navy Captain Harry Raymond Thurber. They were both highly experienced intelligence officers with a knack for strategic thinking.
Okay, so we got the context. Cold War paranoia, a team of deception specialists, and two masterminds at the helm. But how does a rancher finding debris in the New Mexico desert fit into all of this? It seems like a pretty random event to orchestrate.
That's where it gets even more fascinating. Just a few weeks before the Roswell incident, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 unusual objects flying near Mount Rainier.
Ah, yes, the famous flying saucer sightings. I remember reading that Arnold described them as flat like a pie pan and moving like a saucer would if you skipped it across the water. His sighting essentially kick-started the whole flying saucer craze, didn't it?
It did, and that's precisely what makes it so crucial to the deception theory. Arnold was a respected businessman and an experienced pilot. Making his account all the more credible, he even meticulously calculated the speed of these objects, which was, by all accounts, impossibly fast for any known aircraft at the time.
So we've got this pilot reporting these incredible sightings. The media's having a field day, and the public's imagination is running wild. What do the deception planners do with this sudden national obsession with flying saucers?
They seized the opportunity, according to Carrion. They began feeding the media a narrative, a story that would both play on public fears and mislead the Soviets. They wanted the Soviets to believe that the U.S. was developing a revolutionary new weapon, something even more powerful than the atomic bomb.
So it's like a double bluff. They're putting on this show of force, knowing full well the Soviets are watching and listening. But how do you convince a global superpower? So you've got something so advanced, so game-changing, without actually revealing anything concrete?
That's where the real ingenuity of the deception comes in. Newspaper articles started popping up, fueled by leaks from sources within the military, speculating about this so-called superweapon. They didn't offer specifics, of course, but they hinted at technology far beyond anything the Soviets could imagine.
They're dropping breadcrumbs, creating this aura of mystery and intrigue around this supposed superweapon. I bet the Soviets were eating it up right, desperate for any intel they could get their hands on.
Absolutely. The Soviets were obsessed with keeping pace with American military advancements, and this carefully crafted narrative was designed to play right into their anxieties.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense. But there's one piece of the puzzle that still feels a little murky. We've got the flying saucer sightings, the superweapon rumors, and the media frenzy. But how does the actual Roswell incident, the alleged crash, fit into this web of deception?
That's where it all comes full circle. The Roswell incident was the ultimate proof, the physical manifestation of this advanced technology the U.S. was supposedly developing. It was the icing on the cake of this meticulously crafted deception. Remember that in July of 1947, just weeks after Arnold's sightings, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release announcing the recovery of a flying disc.
Right, the infamous press release. That was quickly retracted and replaced with the explanation that it was just a weather balloon. Classic cover-up, right?
Well, that's precisely what the deception planners wanted you to believe. Think about it. Why would the 509th Bomb Group, the unit responsible for the atomic bombs, release such a sensational story if it were true? They were known for their secrecy, and this sudden burst of publicity just doesn't fit their usual modus operandi.
That's a really good point. It's almost like they were intentionally drawing attention to themselves, fueling the fire they had already started.
Exactly. And there's another interesting detail in that initial press release. It stated that not all of the disk material had been recovered, implying a larger debris field and hinting at technology beyond anything the Soviets could comprehend.
So they're not just planting the seed of a story, they're carefully cultivating it, adding these little details to make it seem even more credible.
Yeah.
But wouldn't journalists have been skeptical? I mean, wouldn't they have tried to verify these claims?
You'd think so. But remember, this was a different era. The Cold War was in its infancy, and there was a lot of fear and uncertainty surrounding the Soviet Union's capabilities. People were primed to believe the worst.
And the media, with its hunger for sensational headlines, played right into their hands. It's like they became an unwitting tool of the deception.
Absolutely. And the deception planners were masters of manipulating the media. They would leak information to reporters they knew were sympathetic to the cause, sometimes even planting stories directly. And they were very careful about controlling the international dissemination of information, making sure the Soviets received a very specific narrative.
So they weren't just controlling what information got out, but who got to see it. They were curating the story for both domestic and international audiences.
Exactly. Information control was a key weapon in their arsenal. And it wasn't just the media they were manipulating. Carrion argues they went even further, staging events to reinforce the narrative of advanced U.S. technology.
Okay, now we're really getting into the cloak and dagger stuff. Tell me more about these staged events.
One of the most intriguing examples involves a pilot named Fred Chrisman. In June of 1947, just a few weeks after Arnold's sightings, Chrisman claimed to have witnessed what we now call the Maury Island incident.
The Maury Island incident. I'm not familiar with that one.
Well, according to Chrisman, he and a harbor patrolman saw 6 donut-shaped objects hovering over Puget Sound in Washington state. One of them supposedly dropped metallic debris onto their boat.
Hold on a second. Donut-shaped objects. That sounds eerily familiar, given the flying saucers everyone was talking about.
Exactly. The Maury Island incident, occurring so close to Arnold's sightings, added another layer of credibility to the narrative the deception planners were weaving. And Carrion believes this incident, like the Roswell incident, was carefully staged.
Oh, wow, if that's true.
Yeah.
It takes this whole theory to a whole new level. It suggests they were willing to go to extraordinary lengths to sell this deception. But how do you stage something like that? Wouldn't people have seen through it?
Remember, this was a time of great uncertainty and fear. People were looking for answers, for explanations. And the government, with its air of authority and secrecy, was often seen as the most trustworthy source of information.
So they were using the public's own anxieties against them. Sort of brilliant, albeit somewhat manipulative tactic. But how does the Maury Island incident, even if it was staged, fit into the larger picture? Was it just another data point in their campaign to convince the Soviets of their superweapon?
It was more than that. The Maury Island incident had another, more sinister purpose. It was also used to justify expanding the search for Soviet spies within the U.S.
Wait, what? So they were using the fear of flying saucers, the fear of this unknown technology, to crack down on potential enemies within their own borders.
That's right. General George Shulgin, who we mentioned earlier as a key figure in the JSC, was instrumental in connecting the flying saucer narrative to the hunt for Soviet spies. He argued that the Soviets might be using the flying saucer hysteria to spread disinformation and sow chaos within the U.S.
That's a pretty bold claim. Was there any evidence to support his theory?
Not really, but Shulgin was a persuasive figure, and he managed to convince the FBI, who were already on high alert due to the Cold War tensions, to assist in investigating flying saucer witnesses.
So now, not only are they trying to deceive the Soviets, they're also using this manufactured fear to justify expanding their surveillance of their own citizens. It's a pretty chilling thought, isn't it?
It is, and it highlights the complex and often unsettling interplay between intelligence operations, public perception, and government control.
It makes you wonder how much of what we believe to be true is actually the result of carefully crafted narratives designed to serve a specific agenda.
That's one of the most thought-provoking aspects of Carrion's theory. He's not just offering an alternative explanation for the Roswell incident, he's challenging us to question everything we think we know about history, about the information we consume, and about the motives of those in power.
So if we accept Carrion's premise that the Roswell incident was a carefully constructed lie, where does that leave us? What are the long-term implications of this deception?
Well, for starters, it suggests that the government was willing to deceive its own people, not just its enemies, to achieve its objectives. And it raises questions about how much control the government had, and perhaps still has, over the flow of information.
And what about the impact on our understanding of the unknown? The Roswell incident has fueled decades of speculation about extraterrestrial life, government cover-ups, and the nature of reality itself.
That's right, the Roswell incident, whether it was a genuine UFO crash or a staged event, has become a cultural touchstone. It's a symbol of the mystery and intrigue that surrounds the unexplained. And it's difficult to overstate the impact this single event has had on our collective imagination.
So what's the takeaway here? Are we supposed to believe that everything we've been told about Roswell is a lie? That the government is pulling the strings, manipulating our perceptions?
Carrion isn't asking us to blindly accept his theory as gospel truth. He's simply presenting an alternative perspective, a different way of looking at the evidence. He's encouraging us to be critical thinkers, to question the official narrative, and to consider the possibility that there might be more to the story than we've been led to believe.
That's a powerful message, especially in an era where misinformation and disinformation are rampant. It's a reminder that we can't always take things at face value, that we need to be discerning consumers of information, and that we should always be willing to challenge the status quo.
Exactly, and Carrion himself acknowledges that proving or disproving his theory would require the declassification of sensitive government documents, something that may not happen for years, if ever.
So we're left with this fascinating theory. Compelling evidence, but no definitive answers. It feels like we've reached the end of the path, but it just leads to more questions.
And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The Roswell incident, even if it was a deception, continues to capture our imaginations. It forces us to grapple with the unknown, to question our assumptions, and to explore the possibility that there might be more to the world than meets the eye.
You know, as frustrating as it can be to not have all the answers, I find it kind of liberating. It reminds me that there's still so much to learn, so much to discover, so much to question. It's like we've been handed a map, but it's a map with blank spaces, inviting us to fill them in ourselves.
And that's what we encourage you to do. Don't take anything at face value. Question everything. Dig deeper. Explore alternative perspectives. The truth might be out there, but it's up to each of us to find it.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive, and I have a feeling we'll be thinking about the Roswell incident and its implications for a long time to come. To all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. Until next time. It feels like we've just scratched the surface of this whole Roswell incident. But if we step back for a moment, what are the larger implications of Carrion's theory? I mean, we're talking about a potential deception. That has shaped public perception for over 70 years.
That's right. One of the most significant consequences, as we've touched on, is the impact this deception may have had on the rise of UFO culture and conspiracy theories.
It makes sense. The government creates this aura of mystery, fueling public speculation, and then offers these vague, often contradictory explanations. It's the perfect recipe for breeding distrust and giving rise to alternative theories.
Precisely. And that distrust, that sense that we're not being told the whole truth, continues to this day. It makes you wonder if those actions back in 1947 unintentionally shaped how we view unexplained phenomena even today.
So it's not just about a single event in the New Mexico desert. It's about the erosion of trust, the blurring of lines between fact and fiction, and the lingering questions that remain unanswered.
And that brings us to another crucial point, the role of strategic deception in shaping history. If the Roswell incident was indeed a carefully orchestrated lie, what other historical events might we view differently through this lens?
That's a chilling thought. Are there other Roswells out there? Events that have been presented to us in a certain way, but might have hidden motives or manipulations behind them?
It's certainly a possibility. Carrion's theory forces us to reconsider the narratives we've been told and to acknowledge that history is often written by those in power, those with the ability to control the flow of information.
It's a reminder to be critical thinkers, to question the official stories, and to seek out multiple perspectives before forming our own conclusions. But where do we even begin? I mean, how can we possibly sift through the layers of history and separate facts from fiction?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Carrion himself acknowledges the difficulty of proving or disproving his theory definitively. He points out that many of the relevant government documents are still classified, and it's unclear when or if they'll ever be released to the public.
So we're left with this fascinating theory, compelling evidence, but no definitive answers. It feels like we've reached the end of the path. But it just leads to more questions.
And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The Roswell incident, even if it was a deception, continues to capture our imaginations. It forces us to grapple with the unknown, to question our assumptions, and to explore the possibility that there might be more to the world than meets the eye.
You know, as frustrating as it can be to not have all the answers, I find it kind of liberating. It reminds me that there's still so much to learn, so much to discover, so much to question. It's like we've been handed a map, but it's a map with blank spaces, inviting us to fill them in ourselves.
And that's what we encourage you to do. Don't take anything at face value. Question everything. Dig deeper. Explore alternative perspectives. The truth might be out there, but it's up to each of us to find it.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive, and I have a feeling we'll be thinking about the Roswell incident and its implications for a long time to come. To all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Until next time.